You know that moment when something feels off, but you can't explain why. That quiet instinct whispering that something isn't right and you ignore it anyway. I should have listened. Because looking back, the gift was the first warning. It was wrapped in ivory paper, too pristine, too deliberate, with a satin bow tied so perfectly it looked rehearsed. That alone should have told me something. Renata never did anything without intention. She slid the box across the table toward me during my birthday dinner, her fingers lingering just a second longer than necessary. Her smile followed, tight, elevated, almost artificial. It didn't reach her eyes. "Go on," she said, just loud enough to draw attention. Aunt Cecile paused mid-bite. My mother, Dora, went completely still. That silence? That was the second warning. Inside the box, cushioned in layers of tissue paper, sat a consumer DNA testing kit. Renata leaned back, watching me, not casually, but expectantly. Then she said it. "Maybe this will finally explain why you turned out so different from the rest of us." She laughed. No one joined her. I placed the box gently beside my glass of water and thanked her in the tone I had perfected over 37 years. Controlled, neutral, unreadable. But it wasn't Renata's cruelty that stayed with me. It was my mother's fear. That look on her face told me something had already begun, something I wasn't meant to see. Not yet. If you think this was just sibling rivalry, stay with me, because what came next rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life. Let me take you back. I grew up in a house in Raleigh that looked like it belonged in a postcard. Wide porch, dogwood tree in the yard, sunlight filtering through lace curtains. From the outside, it was perfect. Inside, it was something else entirely. It wasn't a home, it was a structure. A hierarchy disguised as a family. And at the top of that structure stood Renata. She owned that space the way some people own a room without trying. Loud, magnetic, demanding, she didn't just speak, she occupied. My mother revolved around her, adjusting constantly like a compass that refused to settle. And me, I existed in the background. I was the quiet one, the useful one. The one who learned early that recognition wasn't given. It was earned through effort, silence, and compliance. I cleaned without being asked. Excelled without celebration. Existed without disruption. By the time I left for graduate school, I had already accepted a truth most people spend years fighting. I was not the favorite. So I stopped trying to be. Instead, I built something else, something sturdier than approval. I built competence. Philadelphia became my escape. I worked in healthcare compliance, auditing hospital systems, dissecting financial discrepancies, exposing what institutions preferred to keep hidden. I had a talent for uncovering what others buried. It's strange, isn't it? How easily we can see through strangers and completely miss what's hidden in our own lives. My father, Warren, was the exception in our family. He wasn't loud. He wasn't dramatic, but he paid attention. The kind of attention that stays with you. He remembered things, small details, passing thoughts, and brought them back when they mattered most. Conversations with him felt steady, grounded, safe. When he died 18 months before that birthday dinner, something shifted, not loudly, but permanently. The tension between Renata and me, once contained, was suddenly unrestrained. There was no longer anyone setting limits. No one holding the line. The birthday dinner had been my mother's idea, but everything about it bore Renata's signature. The restaurant was close to our old home. The guest list was minimal, just enough people to witness, not enough to intervene. My mother barely looked at me the entire night. Renata, on the other hand, dominated the table, stories, opinions, commentary, claiming every inch of conversation like territory. But beneath her performance, there was something new. Something sharper, anticipation. She wasn't just being cruel, she was waiting for something to unfold. That's why I mailed the DNA kit the very next morning. Not because I cared what it would say, but because Renata did. And that alone made it dangerous. 5 weeks later, on a quiet Wednesday, everything changed. I was standing in my kitchen when the notification appeared. I sat down before opening it. Something inside me already knew. No genetic relationship detected with the Caldwell maternal line. Strong match identified, Sarapin family. I read it once, then again, and again. The words didn't change, only their weight did. You'd expect devastation, shock, maybe even anger. But what I felt was something quieter, like walking into a room you've lived in your whole life and realizing the furniture has been rearranged. Everything familiar suddenly isn't, but somehow it makes more sense. For 37 years, I had questioned that distance in my family, wondered if it was imagined, if I was simply different. Now I knew I hadn't imagined anything. I didn't call anyone, didn't text, didn't panic. I forwarded the results to my mother with a single line. "I think you already know what this says." She called within 4 minutes, not to explain, to contain. "Please don't share this," she said immediately, her voice fragmented. "You don't understand. It was a long time ago, things were different." She circled the truth without ever touching it. No apology, no accountability, just one word repeated over and over: "Please." Renata's message came shortly after. 3 words: "Now you know." That was when I understood. This wasn't a revelation. It was a move. And if you think that was the worst part, you're not ready for what she said when I called her that night. Backhand index pointing right. If you're hooked so far, make sure you're following, because part 2 is where everything unravels. I called her anyway. She answered like I was interrupting her day. I didn't waste time. "Why?" I asked. "Why do it like this? Why now?" There was a pause. Then she spoke, calm, steady, precise. And what she said didn't just explain her actions. It exposed everything. Because Dad knew. And just like that, everything I thought I understood about my family collapsed. Because Dad knew, the words didn't land all at once. They settled slowly, like dust after something heavy had been dropped. I tightened my grip on the phone. Knew what? That you weren't his. There it was, not softened, not hesitated, not even delivered with anger. Just placed. Clean, precise, final. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "And you thought announcing it at dinner was the best way to handle that?" A quiet scoff came through the line. "Don't make this about manners." "Then what is it about?" Another pause, longer this time. And when she spoke again, her tone shifted, cooler, sharper. "Control." That word lingered. Before I could respond, she continued. "Dad had already started asking questions before he died, about the estate, about certain discrepancies. I needed you distracted." My chest tightened. "Distracted?" "Yes," she said plainly. "Because if you were busy questioning who you were, you wouldn't be questioning what I was doing." The room felt smaller. "What were you doing, Renata?" She didn't answer right away. "Then I've known for 15 years. The number hit harder than the truth itself. 15 years, she repeated. "And for 15 years, I held it over Mom, thought it might come in handy someday." A faint, humorless breath. Turns out I was right. The line went dead before I could say anything else. Silence has different textures. There's the kind that feels peaceful, and then there's the kind that follows truth, the kind that presses in on you. That was the kind filling my apartment that night. And for the first time since opening the test results, I wasn't thinking about who I was. I was thinking about what had been happening around me, without me. I contacted an attorney the following week. Her name was Patricia S. She didn't waste words, didn't offer comfort, didn't pretend anything about this situation was normal, which is exactly why I trusted her. I brought everything I had. The DNA results. A photograph I had found tucked inside one of my father's old files, an unfamiliar man holding an infant that was unmistakably me. And a series of text messages a cousin had quietly forwarded. Messages between Renata and a paralegal at our family's estate firm. Patricia reviewed everything in silence. No reaction, no interruption. When she finally looked up, her expression hadn't changed, but her focus had sharpened. "Your sister," she said evenly, "has been in contact with the estate attorney at least 6 times in the past 8 months." I leaned forward slightly. "Is that unusual? For someone grieving?" she replied. "Yes." A brief pause. "That's not grief," she added. "That's preparation." 4 days later, the estate attorney called, Gerald Marsh. His voice was measured, careful in a way professionals only become when something significant is at stake. He informed me that my father had left specific instructions regarding the timing of the will reading, and that those conditions had now been met. Then he said something that confirmed everything Patricia suspected. I recommend you bring legal counsel. The morning of the reading was gray and uninviting. The kind of sky that offers no interpretation, just wait. Marsh's office sat in a downtown building designed to impress permanence. Dark wood. High ceilings, sound that didn't echo, it settled. Everything about it said one thing: what happens here stays decided. My mother was already there when I arrived. She looked smaller somehow, tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. She didn't acknowledge me, didn't meet my eyes, didn't speak. Renata arrived last. Confident, composed, dressed in precision, every detail intentional. She wasn't nervous. She was certain. Behind her stood her attorney, a man I recognized from highway billboards. The kind of lawyer people hire when they expect a fight. Renata glanced at me as she took her seat. That same expression from the dinner. Anticipation. Marsh began without ceremony. No small talk, no easing in, just facts. Warren Caldwell leaves 65% of his estate, the words seemed to slow. Including the Raleigh property, investment accounts, and all held assets. A breath. To his daughter. Another pause, then, to you. For exactly 1 second the room held still. Then it broke. That's not possible. Renata was already on her feet. This is incorrect. There's been a mistake. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but cracking at the edges. There are DNA results, she continued, pushing the words forward like evidence. She's not even, Miss Caldwell, Marsh interrupted calmly, if you'll allow me to finish. Her attorney placed a hand on her arm. She shook it off. Marsh didn't react. He simply continued reading. Mr. Caldwell was aware from the age of 3 that his daughter was not his biological child. The room shifted again, but differently this time. Quieter. He chose to remain her father, Marsh continued, and further states that throughout her life she demonstrated the values he most wished to preserve. The words were unmistakably deliberate, carefully chosen, and final. Renata's expression changed, not to shock, to calculation. Marsh reached for another document. This decision, he said, was not made without consideration. He paused. In the final year of his life, Mr. Caldwell retained a private investigator. That was the moment everything turned. The report was thorough, detailed, precise in a way that left no room for interpretation. It documented Renata's communications with multiple estate attorneys. It outlined a pattern of behavior, not emotional but strategic. And then, it listed financial transfers. Over $40,000. Moved from a joint account my father shared with Dora into an account solely under Renata's name, during his final hospitalization. Renata's attorney went completely still, but Marsh wasn't finished. He placed one final item on the table, a handwritten letter. This, he said, is addressed to Miss Renata Caldwell. The room felt smaller as he began to read. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was something far more unsettling. It was clear. My father wrote that he had seen what she was doing, that he had given her time to stop, that he had hoped she would choose differently, but that the consequences she now faced were not his doing. They were hers, no raised voice, no accusation, just truth, recorded. By the time Marsh finished, no one spoke. Not immediately. Then Patricia stood. Her voice, as always, calm and exact. The will includes a no-contest provision, she explained. Any challenge to its validity will result in the reclassification of all undocumented financial transfers as personal debt owed to the estate. A brief pause. Estimated at approximately $240,000. That was it. That was the moment. Renata stopped talking. For the first time in her life, there was no position above her to absorb the consequences. Her attorney withdrew the next morning. The challenge was filed and dismissed within the week. The will stood. The debt remained. And the structure she had relied on her entire life collapsed under its own weight. My mother came to see me a month later. No audience, no performance, just truth. She told me everything she had never said. The name of my biological father, the circumstances, the choices she had made, and the ones she hadn't. She said she had always loved me, and I believe she did, but love without honesty is a closed room. You can describe it, you can decorate it, but you can't live inside it. I told her I needed distance. Not repair, not yet. Maybe not ever. I handled the estate remotely with Patricia. I didn't return to Raleigh, didn't go back to that house. Instead, I chose something else. A smaller place, outside Asheville. Quiet, open, unclaimed. A space with no history I didn't choose for myself. I kept my father's letter, not as proof of loss, not as victory, but as something simpler. Clarity, because in the end, that's what I inherited. Not money, not property, but truth. And truth has a cost. It always does. The only question is, when it finally reaches you, are you ready to accept what it changes? Backhand index pointing right if this story stayed with you, follow for more. Because some truths don't just reveal the past, they redefine everything that comes after.